Do you believe that Trump is actually going to end this war in Ukraine? Do you think that's happening? What's your view on what's going on there?
Yeah. Uh, I don't think he will. I've said that. I think he actually wants to. He doesn't like it. Like he says it's a stupid war. Um, but we've he has really two main avenues that he could take. One is to try to attempt negotiations, but I think that there's just no way. For some of the one of the reasons I just gave you is that the Russians on for their side, they don't. They have every reason to be suspicious and not to enter into an agreement with the U.S. It's got to be an ironclad agreement. I don't know how you can do that to really guarantee that the U.S. will keep its side of the bargain. And that's hard to do. How do you make that? How do you guarantee something like that? And then okay, that's on the Russian side, but on the U.S. side, I just don't think it's politically possible, as I said before, for Trump to accede to um, Russia's terms. It's just not something. It would be an admission of weakness vis-a-vis the Russians. It would be an admission that we really lost the war. And I don't think that Trump can do that. Maybe I'm wrong, but I don't think so. I mean, he's going to have too much opposition. He himself may not be willing to do it, and then even if he were willing to do it, he may just find that there's just too much opposition within his own government to it. Um, and then what we're looking at. Okay, the other avenue that he can take is which we've talked about earlier, is he can just cut off military assistance, all military equipment and munitions to Ukraine, and that would bring the war to an end rather quickly. I think in a month's time. At most 2 months. Now the problem with that approach. I mean, it's easier, and he can justify it. Say this is Biden's war. He lost it. This was stupid. The Ukrainians are corrupt. They're crazy, and we could, like we say, I think it would be really, really important to change the narrative. If he does all that work, I think maybe he can get away with it. I don't know if he really is going to be able to do that. If he's not able to change the narrative, and you cut off supplies to Ukraine, what's going to happen when the Russians, let's say, cross the Dnieper and start marching towards Odessa or marching towards Kiev? We don't know how far they're going to go. At some point, there's just going to be panic maybe not in the streets, but certainly within, government offices all throughout the West. And there's going to be a lot of shrieking and say, look, what has Trump's done? The Russians are coming. The Russians are coming. And I don't know what that will lead to, because I don't think really there's a whole lot we can do about it. But there's going to be a political price to pay. So he may just finally say, this is a really stupid war, but I just can't, I inherited it and I can't get out of it.
You really think so? You don't think kind of his moves with USAID, stopping the funding of these NGOs, and 90% of Ukrainian media was being funded by the United States. Like that in itself, I think is almost a death knell to the Ukrainian regime.
Right.
Right.
Well, with Trump, there's just, I don't know, I would like to believe that there is a coherent strategy. But with Trump, you just never can tell. We just saw what he said in connection with Gaza. And then in Ukraine, what he was just saying, yeah, well, we can just take their rare earths and then, pay for the war that way. And it's just sort of like a businessman looking at it. And earlier he was talking about threatening Russia. Maybe he's realizing that's not going to work now. I'd like to say there's a coherent strategy. The one person that really laid it out and made it clear to me that he understood what was going on in the world was, again, Marco Rubio, the Secretary of State. And, what he said was quite extraordinary. It's the sort of thing that's been said in dissident, anti-Western hegemony media for years. And he was talking like that. And I very much got the sense that, again, he understood what he was saying. He wasn't just mouthing some words. He understood the problem at a very kind of high conceptual level. And so, there is a coherence there, I think, clearly in Marco Rubio's mind. I don't know about Trump. Maybe, again, because he's Secretary of State, maybe he can help to guide Trump through this. Trump is, I think he has a lot of good instincts. One thing he's done is that he's starting to humanize the Russians. right? We've talked about he loved the Russian people. I think that recently there was a hockey game or something. He went out and particularly congratulated this Russian hockey player. And I think, those are small gestures, but they're important because there has been, these last 4 years have been a time of just kind of unrelenting demonization, not just of Putin and the Russian government, but of Russia in general. And maybe, we're seeing, so, he clearly has some good instincts, but then he has some really crazy thoughts like the rare earths and that kind of thing. And I don't know what side of Trump is going to really win in the end, or if, this one kind of untethered, real estate mogul side of him is going to destroy all those good impulses or run counter to those good impulses. And I think it's just too early to say. Like with Biden, you knew what you had and it was all bad. Let's say there was no chance. There was never any expression of interest in really in ending the war. But with Trump, I think there is an interest. It's clear, first of all, unclear, first of all, whether or not he himself has enough of a coherent strategy to really move forward on it. I believe Marco Rubio and J.D. Vance and people like that do, and maybe they will be able to convince Trump, to follow some coherent strategy. There's reason to hope that. But then Trump is this loose cannon, so we don't know if at some point he might just do a 180 and decide to escalate. He'll get convinced by other people, because don't forget that no matter what, yeah, he's been doing some house cleaning, and that's good. But this house is big and it's full of neocons, and there are going to be a lot of people, including some of the people that he's appointed, that will try to work to convince him, to take an opposite approach. They'll tell him, "Hey, you got to demonstrate strength," and I think he's kind of vulnerable to that sort of argument. You got to escalate in order to de-escalate. You got to really put the pressure on the Russians, and then the Russians will come to the table. And I'm sure he's hearing both things. He's hearing the realist argument, but he's also hearing the neocon argument. I think his inclination is to go with the realists, but he just may also make the political calculation that he can't do it. It's too early to say. I'm remain pessimistic, but there is a chance. I just don't even want to put a number on it because we're in such early days right now, and Trump is just so difficult to predict. That I don't want to say anything about what's going to happen.
It's Trump. He's only been in office for a little over 2 weeks, and it's just been a whirlwind, man. Right. It's just or do you think we should expect this breakneck speed of just change for 4 years? We might be looking at a completely different world by the end. And who knows where it's going to end up? It could be great. It could be the end of the world. It's just...
Yeah, right. It's really, it's going for a ride. And I don't know where it's going to end up. There's clearly, you have to say that he's had some successes, at least for the moment, here in the Western Hemisphere. He made the terror threats against Canada and Mexico, but now those have been suspended. They haven't been actually canceled. He hasn't rescinded these threats, but I think it's been, in one case 30 days, the other case 50 days. And both countries have agreed to send troops to the border and try to, to put an end to the flow of fentanyl, in particular, into the United States. And if he just achieves that and then rescinds the tariff orders, you'd have to say, hey, this was a success, right? But we just don't know. Maybe he won't know when to stop, but maybe he does know when to stop. I'm not going to make a judgment yet. I'm just watching this extraordinary show. And then in the case of Panama, he sent Marco Rubio down there, and the Panamanians have agreed to withdraw from the Belt and Road Initiative and not to renew the contracts by 2 Hong Kong companies, that have been working at the port facilities, providing services to the port facilities there in the Panama Canal. So you'd have to say that was a success from his point of view. It's just to push the Chinese out from our region. Now, I hope that he applies this principle, of spheres of influence consistently. again, Marco Rubio laid it out. He said, we live in a multipolar world. We need to accept that. That's the reality. And they say, okay, this is our sphere of influence. We don't want the Chinese in here. But now can you stop and just think, what the Chinese are thinking about, why are we right off their coast? Why are we helping to build up the military of what they regard as, and we also acknowledge to be, a renegade province, which is Taiwan? If they have their own interests, and we're within our rights to demand the expulsion of the Chinese from the Panama Canal, then why do we have the right to be right off the coast of China, right? It's obviously a huge double standard, which the Chinese can't fail to see, and then even more so in connection with Russia. So we're just hopefully okay. Just as I say, it's not like this is all pretty and fair or whatever. This idea of spheres of influence, of great powers. Multipolarity is not a utopian vision, but it's a realistic vision, and part of it is that you need to acknowledge the security interests of other great powers. That's been the problem, really. Is that we refuse to acknowledge the security interests of for example, Russia, and that's why we have this war. The Russians were saying, "Hey, you need to do this. Hey, this is really important to us. This is existential. This is threatens our continued existence. You need to listen to us, and we need to negotiate a solution." We refuse to. We would not allow ourselves to be concerned with their security interests, only ours. Now, we have to see, is this going to really change? I think there's some hope that it will somewhat. Again, because of things that Trump himself has said, I think his own obvious inclinations, and then because of this really, to me, quite shocking statement by Rubio. Clearly, he understands what's going on. We have a different team in power. With Trump there in the middle, he's kind of a human wrecking ball. He is kind of the bull in the china shop. So it makes me reluctant to make any sort of firm predictions. But even so, I think we are seeing a reorientation of American foreign policy, something that we haven't seen. We've been on one track for decades and decades, and this may finally be changing. I don't think we're going to see a U-turn. I wish we would, but it's to switch metaphors. It's like a super tanker. It takes a long time for it to turn and start heading off in another direction. But I think maybe we're just seeing a little bit of a turn. And if at the end of these 4 years, there is, I don't think we'll see dramatic changes in policy, but if we see any significant change in orientation that's consistently held throughout these years, I think that's very meaningful. And hopefully it will be continued by future administrations.
Hey guys, I hope you're enjoying the conversation so far. I promise to only take 1 minute of your time. If you're using AI, please consider checking out my website, Novlisky.io. Right now, we're in the middle of this AI arms race. Nobody knows what's the best AI to use. Yesterday was OpenAI, and everybody's talking about DeepSeek. This is great for us as consumers of AI, but what's not so great is having to jump from platform to platform. You don't want to have to sign up for a monthly subscription on OpenAI and then move over to Anthropic and then move over to DeepSeek. So what we built here at Novlisky is an AI hub. It allows you to access hundreds of AI models. We update them as soon as a new model comes out. It is integrated into our system, and you can use them all under one platform. And another thing that's so great about this website is that you can easily use multiple models at the same time to compare which is best for whatever use case. So, for example, I'm going to use Anthropic and GPT-4 at the same time. So I get side-by-side results. I use this in my work every single day. I think you'll find it incredibly useful. There's tons of customizations. We have an iOS and Android native app as well, so you have seamless synchronization across all devices. So please check it out. I think it's something you'll find incredibly useful. There are no subscription fees, no rate limits. I guarantee you it's going to save you money, and it's just going to keep you on top of all AI releases. Yeah, let's hope we can get there. There's so many things that are coming out of left field, though. Like so many things that I just never thought would happen. I mean, just Greenland, this whole Gaza thing, just everything has just been, but it is true. If you take a step back, one of the biggest things is that acceptance of a multipolar world from Marco Rubio. This idea, and then the signaling of the end of the U.S. unipolar moment, the hegemony. Right. It is.
Yeah. I think it is hugely. Yeah, I think it's hugely significant. Just the fact that a Secretary of State said that. We haven't heard a Secretary of State speak like that since, I don't know when, and not in my lifetime. Certainly not since the unipolar moment. Since the fall of the Soviet Union. We haven't heard anything like that. So I think it's hugely significant. Even if he doesn't really follow through, he's not able to implement it fully. And I think we have to be honest that it won't be possible for him to implement these ideas fully. But if he can even implement a bit of it, or even just the fact that he said it, I think means a lot, because it shows that these ideas, that I've been familiar with for years and years, that they've all been on the fringe in the United States and in the West in general, and suppressed. And now here it's coming out of the mouth of the Secretary of State. It shows that this reality is seeping through. It may be a longer process than we hope to finally really, implement this new awareness. But it does show that reality amazingly has seeped through to somebody like a real establishment figure. Let's not forget that. Rubio was very much an establishment Republican, but he gets it. He I don't know if he watched a video or he just looked at the reality. He started to really reflect on what was happening in the world, and it just, he had to accept what the real trends were, and the need for the U.S. to, make adjustments. It's not just that, he didn't just say that there is this multipolar world that we must come to terms with, but he also says we got to start doing diplomacy again. It's just that other powers have interests. That's again a very, very encouraging thing. And we just didn't see that under Blinken. We didn't see anything like that under Blinken.